Good morning, everyone. This is the 2 a.m. advisory from Hurricane Helene, 2 a.m. Thursday morning. Helene, as of the 2 o'clock advisory, still has sustained winds of 85 miles an hour, but it is expected to strengthen. The forecast from the National Hurricane Center calls for it to be a Category 2 hurricane by around 8 a.m. Thursday morning. And from there, it's expected to continue to strengthen through a Category 3 hurricane and actually reach a Category 4 hurricane before making landfall somewhere from Apalachicola over towards Perry. The center perhaps passing over Tallahassee. Remember, the center could be anywhere within this cone, but again at landfall, Category 4 hurricane with winds of 130 miles an hour. That's the forecast. A very dangerous storm. From there, it will continue to move to the north. Right now, the cone has it moving north and then west and then going east. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But the cone to the west of us here on the first coast. However, it is a big storm, so that means we are still going to have impacts from it. Here's a look at Helene right now. The hurricane hunters out there surveying, and so far, again, they're holding on to that Category 1 with sustained winds of 85 miles an hour, but they will keep a close eye on it and let us know as it continues to strengthen. Now, Helene already throwing a lot of moisture our way, a lot of rain over Florida and Georgia. Look at that. There's a tornado warning down in southwest Florida. There was one earlier up in the Georgia area, too. Locally, we've had rain out at the beaches and across southeast Georgia. Looks like more of that rain, even some thunderstorms now starting to pop over southeast Georgia. And then your steadier rain, lighter rain, I should say, over portions of, say, Columbia County all the way back towards Nassau County. Rainfall totals so far over the past 24 hours, not too bad for us. However, we're going to keep an eye over near and west of Tallahassee. They already got a lot of rain yesterday, and unfortunately they are expecting more, of course, with the landfall of Helene. Now here right now, winds not too bad. We're going to see these winds anywhere from 3 miles an hour up to 16 miles an hour for St. Simons Island. These are only going to increase, of course, as we head throughout the day, especially later on this evening. So right now, gusts not coming in, but these will pick up, especially by the lunch hour, and then we move into the evening hours, and that's when the wind will be the worst. We do have coastal flood alerts in place, which means we could have flooding at times of high tide, especially this evening, that we will have to watch out for. So here's a quick look at the threats. I'll step off the screen so you can see this better. As for gusty winds, we expect the strongest winds to move through in the evening and overnight hours. For heavy rain, we expect the most amount of rain to fall in the morning, but it will pick up again in the evening hours. Throughout this entire time period, we're going to have to watch out for the possibility of spin-up tornadoes, and there could be a little bit of surge as well later in the afternoon and evening, and of course, especially along the St. Johns River and our coastal areas, we'll have to watch out for the flooding at times of high tide. So speaking of high tide, St. Simons Island, that's going to be at 4:26 p.m. Mayport, 5 p.m. Fernandina Beach, 5:03 p.m. The Main Street Bridge, 6:43 p.m. Green Cove Springs, 9:57 p.m. and Palatka, 11:42 p.m. Now, this is the later high tide. There is an earlier high tide, but we do expect these evening high tides to be even higher. So that's what we will really be watching out for when it comes to the possibility of some water rise and a little bit of flooding. Quick look at the buoy data. Look at that down in Key West. We are seeing waves around 9 feet, over 6 feet out there in the Gulf of Mexico. And of course, these will only get bigger as Helene moves towards the Gulf. You can see there, we don't have any buoys collecting data, but we see the seas already churning up out and around the area near Helene. Now for us right now, look at that. We have 5 to 7 feet across southeast Georgia and northeast Florida. Besides the seas, those impacts the waters, coastal areas. When it comes to rain and wind, we expect the worst to be to our western areas towards I-75. So Lake City, you could have gusts up to around 90 miles an hour. So anywhere from 75 to 90 at max, and that is extremely dangerous. For the Jacksonville area, for the rest of the First Coast, we're expecting wind gusts between 40 and 60 miles an hour. This could lead to power outages. As for rainfall, 2 to 5 inches but we could have locally higher amounts, especially where those bands set up. So that could lead to some street flooding. And as we discussed, the tornado threat lasts throughout this time period, overnight as well. And a lot of these impacts will happen overnight. So you have to make sure right now and throughout the day today that you're keeping your devices charged. And then when you go to bed, make sure that the sound is on. So goodness forbid there is a tornado warning in your area, you get that alert and you can get to your safe spot quickly. As for our winds, so we obviously are expecting the strongest winds near landfall, and that's winds of 110 miles an hour. For most of the first coast, we're going to see these tropical storm force gusts, 39 to 57 miles an hour. So again, as we talked about, 40 to 60 miles an hour. But for our western areas here, places like Lake City, even towards Waycross, you're going to get some of those stronger wind gusts, perhaps up to hurricane force gusts, so perhaps over 70 miles an hour at times. As we discussed, we won't rule out the possibility of it reaching up to 90 miles an hour. Here's just one model run showing us our future wind gusts, and it says by 12 o'clock Thursday, we could have wind gusts around 30 miles an hour, picking up to 40 miles an hour either side of that by Thursday evening. And then, of course, only ramping up into the overnight hours, gusts around 60 by midnight, except for much stronger for those of you further west, perhaps gusts around 80 miles an hour around midnight over towards Lake City, Columbia County I-75 corridor. Then as we head into our Friday morning, gusts trying to drop back a bit, still very gusty out there though for our early Friday morning, 6 a.m. right around 40 miles an hour. And then it will try to get better. The winds will relax as we head through our Friday, those winds slowly dropping back. As for rainfall totals, we talked about for a good bit of the area, 2 to 5 inches of rain. Now, most of that rain, not a surprise, falling on our western areas. That's where we're going to watch out for the possibility of some flooding. So let's just go county by county. Duval County, your wettest period is going to be from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Thursday. Now your windiest is going to be from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. So more rain during the daylight hours, more wind closer to sunset and then into your overnight hours. We could see gusts to 60 miles an hour, and we'll also watch out for the possibility of isolated tornadoes and flooded roadways. St. Johns and Flagler counties, your worst from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m., gusts of 60 miles an hour, isolated tornadoes possible. Be aware of a little bit of localized street flooding. Glenn, Camden, and Nassau County, same stories. You could have gusts up to 60 miles an hour, the possibility of a little bit of localized flooding, and we will also introduce the possibility of surge. And again, those coastal areas, we'll have to watch out for where we have the coastal flood alerts for flooding at times of high tide. Clay and Putnam counties, gusts to 60 miles an hour, isolated tornadoes possible, and again, watch out for any sort of flooding on the roadways. For Baker, Union, Bradford, and Columbia counties, gusts perhaps up to 90 miles an hour. You will likely have flying debris, a very dangerous situation. When you have winds that strong, you need to treat it like a tornado, where you go inside into a safe spot, an interior room, no external windows or walls. On top of that, there could also be some spin-up tornadoes. Expect power outages in your area. Also, the possibility of localized street flooding with all of that rain. For Ware, Charlton, Brantley, and Pierce counties, you could have gusts up to 75 miles an hour that will also cause flying debris. Same story there, plus the possibility of tornadoes. So you would need to hunker down and get into your safe spot too if you see winds like this with the debris flying around. Very dangerous situation. And again, too, you could have some localized street flooding with all of that rain. As for our coastal waters, it's going to get worse later on Thursday through the night, and we'll have seas of 8 to 18 feet. Again, we'll be watching out for the possibility of that storm surge. Northeast Florida, 1 to 2 feet. Southeast Georgia, perhaps 2 to 4 feet. So here's the wind